Hello and welcome to this video on scoring in minor. We're going to look at melodic minor in this one. In the last video we checked out harmonic minor, and you can see that's still left over on the left here, and then we have the melodic minor on the right. So just to give some context of what we're talking about here, we started in A minor, which is A through G without any flats or sharps. This is the relative minor to C major. If any of this sounds like foreign language to you, just check the description. And I just recently made videos on all this. Everything is in chronological order, so it builds up one video after another. So if you watched all the videos from the beginning, this will make perfect sense to you. So we're in A minor, okay? And again, A through G without any flats or sharps. That's what we have. Okay, so when we create the harmonic minor, we're going to take the 7th degree of the scale, because scales have 7 notes. It's the last note of that scale, or in other words, from the scale that you're using, the note. This one is A, that's A minor, the scale. We just think one note back. Okay, so that's going to be G. We're going to take the 7th degree and we're going to sharpen it. So in the case of A minor, we're going to have G. G becomes G sharp. So now we have the harmonic minor. And then to create the melodic minor, we're going to sharpen the 6th and 7th degree. So in A minor here, we sharpen F and G to F sharp and G sharp. Now something to pay attention to is we still have the leading tone when we're in the melodic minor, because we have that G sharp, the 7th degree, going to A. When we sharpen G to G sharp, this is known as making it a leading tone, because now it is a semitone away. When the last note of a scale is a semitone away, it has a much stronger pull to the tonic, or that root note of the scale. So now G, becoming G sharp, wants to go to A more so than when we had G. And of course, this could just be how we trained our ears here in Western harmony, but a lot of people will agree that it has a sort of pull towards that A note here in A minor. So now to really understand things in music, instead of just learning the topic, we need to actually ask ourselves, why was this created? Why did someone make this in the first place? When we understand why this was created, we can further understand how we're going to use this. And even if we don't want to follow the original reasons, we'll have more of an understanding of all this by asking the question, why? So as we see here, I have a melody written out, and if you pay attention, all the notes that are G are sharpened. But if you see the notes that are F, they're not sharpened. So for now, what I've written in this melody is an A harmonic minor. Now since everything's written, this video is going to be pretty simple on the scoring side. You're not going to have to read that much notes at all. We're basically just going to listen to a playback, and then we're going to listen to it in melodic minor, and we're going to hear that difference. But before hearing the difference, it would help to understand why we're doing all of this in the first place. So I like to boil things down and explain it real simply in case people don't want to watch a whole entire video. So basically, with the A harmonic minor, there's a problem. We raised G to G sharp. Okay, this helps create the leading tone, G sharp to A, and it also makes that 5th degree. Now if we build a chord from a minor 5 to a major 5, all explained in the harmonic minor video. Now when we have that 5 chord, E, G sharp, and B, that G sharp leading tone is in that chord. So that helps with the harmonic function, similar to the major scale, where if we build a chord on the 5th degree, it contains the leading tone, because a major scale already contains the leading tone. This is why some may say that when you are altering the minor scale and creating the harmonic minor here, you're almost taking certain attributes from the major scale and you're putting it here in the minor scale. This might have to do with the natural order of the harmonic series, which further gets into the fact that if we build a 7th chord on chord 5 here, we have a dominant 7th chord that's also found naturally in the major scale, and that dominant chord has a very strong pullback to the tonic. And furthermore, in the harmonic series, if you're building a chord on all the notes that are in your harmonic series, then you're going to have a C, E, G triad, but if you add the next note, which is a minor 3rd, you're going to have a C, E, G, B flat, which actually creates a dominant 7th chord. So from my comprehension, the dominant 7th chord is already in the harmonic series. Since you go from your fundamental, an octave, a 5th, a 4th, a major 3rd, and then your next after the major 3rd is a minor 3rd. So when you put all of that together in order from your fundamental, you see a dominant 7th chord. Now this is all great for that harmonic function, but the problem is the interval between F and G sharp. When we had F and G, those were a whole tone away. Now when we change G to G sharp, we see that this is 3 semitones away. I said originally it was a whole tone, so that would be 2 semitones. Now it's an extra semitone away. If we know our intervals, we know that 1 semitone is a minor 2nd. We know that 2 semitones is a major 2nd. And if we have 3 semitones, that interval is a minor 3rd. But we have the notes F and G sharp. So it's not actually a minor 3rd, but we need to think about it with the notes F and G. Those are a 2nd. So it's actually an augmented 2nd. This is because we're trying to hear this note in the scale as a G sharp. We're not trying to hear it as an A flat. So it's not a minor 3rd in the scale that we're using, it's an augmented 2nd. Because of this, this was an unwanted interval, at least back in the day, in the Baroque period, in the classical period. And there are actual reasons for this that have to do with singing and the idiomatic nature of instruments playing certain lines. I'm going to get into all that, so basically just know there is a reason. So basically to sum it all up, because there's that awkward interval between F and G sharp, here in the melodic minor on the right, if we create F sharp, then we don't have that awkward gap between F sharp and G sharp. Okay, and if we're going to think about this more historically, we can see how the melodic minor scale was used to smoothen out melodic lines while still staying in that minor key, and also still keeping that leading tone. Now I'm going to explain this in a classical mindset, and then I'll get into a more contemporary and jazz mindset after that, where there's less rules and we're understanding the harmony of this more. But when we're looking at a classical mindset, we're not really thinking about the harmony so much. We're more thinking about smoothing out those lines and making it sound better for the melodic motion, for stepwise motion. But when we're descending, oftentimes in the classical Baroque periods, you're going to notice that the melodic minor is not used descending. It actually returns to the natural minor. So they use the melodic minor ascending, going up, and they return to the natural minor descending, going down. So there's a few things that go into this. The first thing is simply that when you're using the melodic minor, it makes it easier to sing. Instead of having that awkward gap between the 6th and the 7th interval, in this case an A harmonic minor, we would have the F and G sharp, that awkward augmented 2nd. So getting rid of that, adding the F sharp, now allows this to be easier to sing. And also when players are playing this on their instrument, especially string players and also some wind players, this is going to be a lot easier for them to play. So then we have to ask ourselves, why did they not use it descending? And this has a lot to do with the leading tone. So instead of G sharp going up to A ascending, G sharp is actually going down to F sharp. Because when you're writing a melodic line, that leading tone is going back to the note before it. So the way I look at this is when we're ascending, there's actually a harmonic reason of why we want to use that leading tone. The G sharp goes to the A. But when we're descending, the G sharp just going to the F doesn't seem like it's actually necessary. So because it's not necessary, returning to the natural minor makes perfect sense. But then this also adds to the fact that the natural minor is easier to sing and play. But as I just described, we would oftentimes want to use that leading tone in certain harmonic applications. So you can see where this is used when we're focusing on the melody. When there's a very strong melody, then there's not the necessity to have that leading tone so much because we're focusing on the melody more, we're not focusing on the harmony. So this is where in music you are sort of sacrificing certain things for certain reasons. We're sacrificing some of the harmonic applications that we get from the leading tone to create a stronger melody, and also to add to that, it makes it easier for the singers and players, especially string players, to sing and play. And this has a lot to do with stepwise motion. If you're writing music that has a lot of stepwise motion in it, especially in the melody, this is where it smooths out some of those lines where you have the awkward augmented 2nd. This is crucial in the Renaissance and Baroque period, but you'll also see this throughout the classical period as well. So the reason why I'm explaining all this so much is because there are actual reasons to consider using the melodic minor ascending and the natural minor when descending. If you are interested in writing string parts, violin parts, then you probably want to pay attention to this. Because when you raise that 6th and 7th degree, this is an awkward fingering for string players, especially when they're descending and they have to switch positions. So to help with all this, scoring in the natural minor is going to help out your string players play this easier, and this might have to do more if you're trying to create that classical sound if you have a group of players that are used to playing classical pieces. And oftentimes, if you're learning about the melodic minor as a violinist, they're going to teach it as the raise 6th and 7th on the way up, ascending, and you return to the natural minor, descending. So this is just something very fundamental that's built into the very basics of string playing. And to sum it up more, since the violin, viola, and cello are tuned in fifths, this allows certain note combinations to be easier to play than others. If you want some historical evidence of this, then we can look at some of the violin treatises by Leopold Mozart, which was the father of W.A. Mozart. In this treatise, he was advising that you use the melodic minor when ascending and you use the natural minor when you're descending to make it easier for the fingering positions of the player. We can check out the Renaissance period, composers like Bach, Vivaldi, and Corelli. We can read their music still, and we can buy it online to this day and read it, and we can see they followed this rule of the melodic minor ascending and the natural minor descending. And we can go further into the classical period. We can look at Mozart and Beethoven. We can see they also followed this in their music. And then we can see if we go further on to the Romantic period of classical music, we get into Chopin, Debussy, Ravel, and Stravinsky, where we start to get closer to contemporary music. We see that they'll oftentimes ignore this and they'll use the melodic minor ascending or descending. So because of this, there's a certain sound that comes to using either or, and because a lot of musicians are used to playing this now, it shouldn't be a problem. But as we see, there's a lot of history to using the melodic minor scale, and now we have more options to use this how we want. When we're thinking about jazz music, they're again just freely using the melodic minor ascending and descending. This does not only have to do with melody though, this actually has to do with the chord implications. Not only are jazz musicians going to be thinking about the actual chords and harmony that you're building off the notes in the melodic minor scale, but they're also going to be thinking about the modes of the melodic minor scale, which is where things get kind of crazy. I'm not going to get into all that in this video, but I'm just going to mention the fact that since we created an F sharp and G sharp, now if we create modes from each of these notes, we're going to have completely different modes than if we were using the natural minor scale and also the harmonic minor scale. So each altered scale has its own altered modes, and jazz musicians love this. There's a lot of cool things like the altered dominant scale. So basically, to conclude why we use the melodic minor scale, it's to fix that awkward gap between the 6th and 7th degrees while still keeping that leading tone. And also there are historical reasons that go with the idiomatic nature of singing and string playing that all correlate to why we would use the melodic minor when ascending, but return to the natural minor when descending, which of course might have a more classical, Baroque sound to it, because you might associate that with that period of music. But we will be able to see if we're creative enough, we can use these scales and these rules just to create different sounds in our music. And now if something doesn't quite sound right, we can think, oh, maybe I actually want to turn this to a melodic minor, or maybe this is a descending line, and maybe I'll try the natural minor and see how this sounds. So just knowing all this stuff is actually going to help us to not only be able to use our ear when we're making music, but also use logic and our ear to come up with the sound that we actually want. Okay, so before we get into the melody, where we're not actually going to have to write anything, we're just going to have to use our ears and listen. Let's talk about the chords that are created when we go to melodic minor here. So when we're looking at melodic minor, of course our tonic is still going to be minor. We have A minor in this circumstance. And here I'm just going to be thinking about the triads. Once we get into 7th chords, there's a lot more here, but that would be a whole another video on its own. So we're just going to quickly go through these chords. We're going to move on to the second one, B. This is chord 2. We actually see now chord 2 is a minor chord instead of being a diminished chord. Now this is important because a minor chord is going to be easier to use. A lot of people will agree that diminished chords are not as easy to use. They can sound out of place, they can sound kind of funky sometimes. So when you're trying to make your music sound nice, they're not very easy to use. We go into the next chord, we see that the chord 3 is still an augmented chord. Now you might hear that this is a chord that's not very useful, but what it actually is useful is getting you to chord 4 and chord 5. We see chord 3 didn't change, harmonic minor and melodic minor, it's an augmented chord. But when we go to chord 4, we see something. We see chord 4 is a major chord. Unlike in harmonic minor, chord 4 remains a minor chord. This is a trademark of harmonic minor, that we have a minor chord 4 going to the next major chord 5. But when we go to melodic minor, we see we have a major chord 4 going to a major chord 5. Now it's actually closer to a major scale, because major has the major 4 and the major 5, but it also has the major 1. So the trademark here of the melodic minor is that you have the major 4-5 and then you have the minor 1. Another trademark of the melodic minor is the next chord. Chord 6 becomes diminished. This is all because we raised that root note of this chord and it was originally major. Now we have a diminished chord. Again, these aren't as easy to use when you're trying to make your music sound nice. And this being chord 6 is kind of funny because this is not a leading tone, so it's more difficult to work with than if it was the leading tone. If we go into the next chord, chord 7, of course this one is the leading tone, G sharp. So this is also a diminished chord, but we see this is going to be easier to use, bringing us to chord 1 because it literally contains that leading tone. A good tip is to not use a diminished triad in its root position, but to use it in first inversion. It sounds a lot better in first inversion than it does in root position, and this has to do with the intervals when you rearrange the notes. Now we comprehend that these chords change when we create the melodic minor. Some of the most important chords to pay attention to are that we now have a minor 2 chord, and then we have that major 4 and that major 5, which we already had that major 5 in the harmonic minor. And now we can imagine where jazz musicians will use this to their favor. They're thinking about the chord implications from this altered scale, and on top of that, when you're building 7th chords, and furthermore, if you start to build 9 chords and further chords that contain upper extensions, then you have even more options, more complex stuff going on, and then you have all the crazy stuff with the modes and whatnot. Okay, so let's actually get into listening to the melody. So we're going to listen to this with only the G sharp being sharpened. We're going to hear the difference. Then I'm going to add the F sharp note to make it the melodic minor. I'm going to do that both ascending and descending first. We'll listen to a playback, and then after that playback, I'll do another playback where I get rid of the melodic minor descending. We're going to return to the natural minor, and we're going to see what that sounds like. Okay, so first, harmonic minor. Okay, now I'm going to change all these Fs to F sharp only when the F is going to G sharp. Now it's going to be F sharp to G sharp to get rid of that augmented second. We also see here on the same beat, I sharpen this F sharp and this F sharp because it's going to sound pretty bad in most circumstances if I have an F and an F sharp, especially in 2 different octaves. This might be something that you'd want to do in a cluster note situation, and that might sound good to you, even then something I normally wouldn't want to do. So we see when the F sharps are in the same beat and just when they're existing very close together. I'm also going to be sharpening other F sharps that are in the same measure, just so it doesn't sound out of place. Okay, so now we're going to listen to a playback in melodic minor with all of those F sharps sharpened around the G sharp. Okay, there we go. Personally, I do feel like when the melodic minor is used ascending, it does sound a little weird. So I'm just going to return to the natural minor here. We're going to see what that sounds like. So now we see that measure is returned to the natural minor because the melody is descending. And here, same thing. Seeing this measure, I'll be returning it to the natural minor because where the G-F relationship is in the melody, it is descending. In the next measure, we can see that the F to G is actually when it's ascending, and because this F exists on the same beat as this F, I'm going to keep this an F sharp. And then again in this third to last measure, I'm going to keep this F sharp here in the bass because it exists in the same measure where we just had the F going to G ascending, which I kept F sharp and G sharp. Okay, so now let's listen to a playback of the melodic minor ascending and the natural minor descending. Okay, so it's all opinion, but I actually preferred it when we returned to the natural minor descending. I think it sounds nicer, but then again it has a different sound. So if I wanted it to sound more mysterious, then I probably would go for that melodic minor descending. But if I'm going for a nicer sound, then I'm probably going to return to the natural minor just because those triads sound pretty good. Again, I'm just using triads in these videos and a lot of the previous videos that I've been teaching a lot of this basic stuff with scoring, and this is perfect because I'm just doing two voices in a lot of these videos. So if I did want to go back and add some seventh chords, then adding it in one of the other voices that supports the harmony would be a great way to do that because I already have the chords highlighted strongly in the bass and melody voice. Then from there, that other harmonic support could just add some more harmonic complexity and some more function within the harmony. Again, we're at a day and age where a lot of this stuff has to do with your opinion of how it sounds, but it's good to know the history, what people used to think, how people broke away from that, started breaking the rules. When you understand this, you're going to be able to create many different styles of music. And if you're like me, that's exactly what you want to do. So that's basically it for this video. We see scoring a melodic minor. I didn't actually really write any notes. You didn't really need to read anything. We're just kind of listening in this one. I did have a lot to say, but it more has to do with just giving historical context to allow you to come up with your own idea of how you want to use this or not use this. So again, the harmonic minor creates that leading tone. It helps with certain harmonic functions, certain cadences. That's also helpful when we stay in the melodic minor because we still have that leading tone, which again helps with the pull to the tonic in chords and also helps with cadences. Adding the raised sixth degree in the melodic minor helps with that awkward leap between the F and the G sharp, or in other words, the sixth and the seventh degree, that augmented second. And then how descending, you don't have the relationship of G sharp going up to A, the leading tone to tonic. So when you're focusing on melody, there's less of a necessity to keep it that harmonic or melodic minor, and we have the option to return to natural minor, but we also have the two other options to make our music sound however we want. But the helpful thing about returning to the natural minor descending is we don't even have to think about the awkward leap between the G and the F. So as we can see, this is something that we might adapt to certain contexts. Maybe we're writing a piece for strings. We're trying to write a string trio, let's say. Well, in that case, we might want to make it easier for the players. We might want to pay attention to creating that melodic minor when ascending, so we still have that nice leading tone, but go to the natural minor when we're descending. But as you can see, and as you can imagine in other styles of music, like in jazz music, you might just like the sound and chords from the melodic minor, so you might just want to use that however you want. So that's it for this video, scoring with the melodic minor. If you found this helpful, you can always leave a comment, give me a thumbs up. I'm posting videos like this at least once a week, so make sure you subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And if you want to see what I've already posted, I have everything organized in my music playlists. So you just go to my channel, you click on the playlist, and you'll see different playlists about certain topics. I have stuff about chords, the minor keys, counterpoint, about intervals, basics of music. I even have some ones where I'm just on a nature walk talking about some cool life lessons that I've learned. So there's a lot of stuff on my channel. There's going to be a lot more to come. We're staying on the basic stuff right now, which is going to help us a lot in the future so we don't forget any of this stuff. So until next time, take care and goodbye.